Hello everyone, it's Framework Days React plus JS conference and we are on track A. Today's second talk is from Tejas. Fun fact about Tejas, Tejas has been writing code since age 8. And today he leads a developer experience team and empowers developer community through education and skills development. He produces video, speaks at conferences, and personally, I really like to watch his talks. They are so he shows his passion about the programming, and you really would like to kind of doing what he explained basically. And as usual, during the presentation, please post your questions to Discord track A channel or to public Telegram channel JS Fwdays. And after the talk, we will have some short Q&A session. So please welcome Tejas.
Was good. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you today about things that I'm just really fired up about. Let's get into it. Let's start with an introduction. So, hi, my name is Tejas. That's pronounced like contagious, or maybe in pandemic times, advantageous is probably better. Either way, Tejas. Say it with me. Tejas, right? And I work at a company called Zata. It's brand new, and I guess if you want a short intro to the company, what we're doing is we're trying to make databases really approachable and worry-free, right? So like to provision or to scale or to maintain a high level of availability, all of these things are quite hard. And we're trying to just make databases easy and good, right? And part of that is developer experience. So I serve as the director of developer relations. Developer experience falls under this umbrella. And that's why I'm here to talk to you about developer experience. But we're not here to talk about Zata. Our product is closed beta. We're not looking to like sell you anything at this point. What we do want to talk about is documentation. We believe docs are so essential to everything. And really for us, the name of the game is world-class developer experience. In fact, that's the title of this talk, world-class developer experience through Evergreen documentation. That is a mouthful. In fact, that's why the slide is so much simpler. It just wouldn't fit. But that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a world-class developer experience with documentation and with our product that is yet to be mainstream, right? So to do that, we got to thinking, how can we do that? Because really we believe that docs are key to good developer experience. That is our motivation. That is our thesis statement. If you're a developer and you're referencing documentation, there's a high chance that either something broke and you're looking for a fix, or you're trying to figure out how to do something and you consult the doc. So you come for answers. If you come for answers and instead you get friction, or you get like, hey, create a GitHub issue with a minimal repro or whatever, you're like less likely to follow through. You're going to be like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll just, abandon this in favor of something else. And so we believe that docs really are essential to good developer experience. And so in our process of trying to find, okay, how do we get like world-class developer experience in our docs? We started with kind of identifying problem areas most documentation sites have, specifically more at our stage. Like we're a really early company, we're like 10-ish people, and we're building fast. And when you build fast, we kind of thought about what problems arise, right? And what we noticed across the board is that docs are often at our stage when you're moving fast, number one, slow. So you deploy some website, you hope it's fast, but sometimes it can fall behind and you deliver like documentation results in maybe a bit longer than a user wants to wait. And you can understand how this might be a problem, because if someone's coming to your doc site, they probably want answers really fast. But if they see a spinner and they have to wait, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm already annoyed. Can you please give me the answer? We want to avoid that. We want our docs to be fast. So docs are often slow for number one. Number two, they're outdated. Like if you move fast and break things, there's a high probability that your engineers tend to build features and stuff without updating the docs. It happens quite often that you either forget to update the docs or you just wait until a release or something and your docs kind of fall behind. We've seen this pattern quite a bit. And we recognize that this is a problem we want to maybe address. Number three, docs are what we're calling impact opaque. And I know that sounds a bit odd, but what it really means is it's often hard to find out if your docs are actually useful, or conversely, if they're unclear and maybe need clarification, right? I know some horror stories where people go looking for answers. They go to a documentation site hoping for finding an answer, and instead they just find like to do or TBD in the docs. And how then can somebody ask for clarification? Would they have to go to GitHub, open an issue, and start a conversation? That's way too much friction. Can we make that simpler? And so that's our mission. We want to really solve these three problems with our documentation. And so with that, I want to say our docs are, and this is very aspirational and hopefully true, but generally more aspirational than anything else. We want to say our docs are fast. We want our docs to be fast. This is paramount. If somebody's looking for an answer, looking for help, they need to get it like immediately. Number two, we want our docs to be up to date, right? None of this like stale stuff. None of this, oh no, we forgot, or we're moving so fast shipping, we forgot to update the docs. No, our docs have to be always up to date. Number three, we want our docs to be impactful. Like if something's not clear, or if we're using some acronym that people aren't familiar with, if we use like ACID guarantees, somebody's like, what is ACID? We want them to be able to quickly ask for help and get it without, open a GitHub issue with a repro. We want to provide that as frictionless as possible. And so with that, let me just walk through some of these in a bit more detail, and then we can look at how it works. So when I say our docs are fast, what does that mean? How are we going about this? We want our docs to be fast by giving people text files. We believe really this is superior, because if you have a static site generated or SSG, you just end up sending text across the wire. And these text files can be stored on a content delivery network or on a CDN, and it can be stored on a CDN node that is really geographically close to your customer, to your user. So what happens then is minimal latency, right? There is no server work that needs to be done because it's a text file. It's already generated. There is no client work to be done. So you're not going to open a page and then it starts fetching something. They get text, they get answers instantly. So we are a huge fan of the static site approach, and serving things from an edge CDN. And really, this would have been way harder if we didn't have a lot of help from Vercel's offering. So let me just adjust this slide here. We want to say thank you to Vercel publicly for their great work on Next.js and their edge that helps us serve our docs really fast. How about the other one? How about keeping our docs up to date? Oftentimes when docs fall behind, it's because engineering teams work hard on engineering, and that's a good thing. But the issue is we update code, we update our Git branches without updating the docs. What if we automatically generate docs from code? That's what we're doing, essentially. We'll look more in the details of how we do that. I'm really excited to share that with you. But yeah, a lot of our docs are just generated from code, and that solves the up-to-date problem. When an upstream repo containing code is merged to main, our docs just update based on that. And number three, we can make sure our docs are being impactful by tracking the impact. So we have a few things in place that allow users to very quickly share feedback with us. This doesn't work. I think this could be clarified. Here's a screenshot. We have things on the doc site that make this easier for users to give us feedback that then we see, we iterate, and then we reach out to the user and say, hey, thank you. We've updated it. So with that, I think I've been talking too much. Let's just, let's look at the doc site, right? And then we can go from there. So let me just quickly share my screen here, and we can look at what's happening. To share my screen, yeah, let's switch over to the laptop here. So nothing special. Let's just open a browser and go to docs.zata.io. Now our product itself is a closed beta, but the docs site is open. You can poke around if you want. And we had three things we talked about, right? We talked about fast, we talked about up-to-date, and we talked about feedbackable. So how is this fast? Let's take a look. So if I reload, don't blink, right? Like it just loads. So if I click on a page, what we're going to see is it's going to be relatively quick. There are no like major bottlenecks. It just kind of snaps around. We do have a progress bar just in case, but generally it's quite quick. But don't take my word for it. Like if we take, let's take this and like do a little Lighthouse audit on it. So if I go here to Lighthouse and just kind of run a report. For those of you who aren't familiar, Lighthouse is something that does audits. Like it checks your website for many different criteria, like performance and SEO, and gives you a report. And as you can see, we have a 100 out of 100 score on Lighthouse. It is as fast as it can possibly be, considering all of the core web vitals. That's what I call impressive. And because it's so fast, and we're missing a bit in accessibility, that's just because of the background color of this. It's not contrast enough. We're working on it. But it's a perfect score, regarding maybe minus those 2 points, because we care about performance. It is fast. It is quite fast. Similar scores on web page tests and other services will reveal it's fast. You know why it's fast? Because it's just a static HTML file. It's literally like here. It's just HTML. It's HTML that's cached and served from a content delivery network. It's fast. Number 2, up to date. How is this up to date? Well, as part of our offering at Zada, we provide developers a REST API. As you can imagine, a REST API has a number of endpoints and a number of methods on those endpoints. Now, to kind of keep our REST API up to date and our application up to date, we describe our REST API using a standard called OpenAPI. It's kind of like the GraphQL SDL, but for REST APIs, if you're familiar. It allows you to just define like every endpoint, every operation, and then our backend team uses the same document to then implement against it. On the backend, our front-end team uses the same document to generate like an SDK in a client, and the doc side uses the same specification to generate docs. So if you look at our API reference here, literally all of these endpoints have stuff that's written not by me, but by the teams that work on the API. This is literally straight up from GitHub. So create database branch, boom. All of this, I wrote none of this. Our docs people wrote none of this. It's automatically generated. That way, when something is merged to main, our doc side just updates with the latest API. And then the backend also updates to implement that. The front end updates to implement that. Everything follows. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Lastly, feedback. How do we do that? I'll show you 2 ways. Number 1, let's go to schema. And maybe you don't understand something, right? Maybe you're like, what is JSON? I don't get it. So the moment I highlight this, you can see, please clarify this. You can see copy link and copy text. If I click on please clarify this, let's just look at what happens. I click on this, flagging, and it says, thank you, we've notified the docs maintainers. So now if I go to the repo of this thing, okay, and I go to issues, I'll see a new issue, clarification from doc site. And it says, please clarify the following, JSON on this page. Boom! So now I know, hey, somebody had an issue with my usage of JSON on that page. I'll go expand it. There's an issue instantly for me to go, or whoever's working on docs, to go fix it. Incredible. Let's go a bit deeper. I'm going to close that though because I just made it. That's one way. What I can also do is, if I scroll down somewhere and I like this type of data, right? So if I copy a link to this and if I send it to my friend, what will happen is it'll literally scroll to it and highlight it. Oof. So you can imagine sharing docs references becomes way easier. But above and beyond that, let's now say, I have an issue with, column types. Something's wrong. So I can click this little feedback button and I'll say column types is weird. Do I want to include a screenshot? Yeah. So if I click this, it literally asks me like what I want to share. This tab, another window, my entire screen. I select one, I click share, and focus the window, takes a screenshot, and I click send. And just like that, after uploading a bit, it says, thanks, we'll review this. Again, I go to my issues here and have a feedback form with, look at that. Look at rich feedback. And so we know what people need help with, right? This is what we mean by world-class developer experience. It's like in service to developers. It's fast, it's up to date, and they can share with us room for improvement. Incredible. Let's look at some code. Since we're here anyway, let's quickly look at the code that makes this work. So if we let's just open Visual Studio Code to the docs repo. Let's move this over here. Okay, so let's talk code. So this is a Next.js application. As we said earlier, thank you to Vercel. We appreciate it. if you're familiar with Next.js, you kind of sort of get how it works, but if you're not, I'd like to tell you a little bit about it now. So if we go to docs.zata.io as a Next.js app, you'll notice if we go to like /concept/branches, that maps directly to something in pages. So every file in your pages directory maps to a route on your website. But you'll notice there isn't any concepts branches here, but instead this thing, a spread syntax slug. What this is actually like a catch-all for everything at the root path. So it receives as a parameter this /concept/branches. It's one React file that receives that as an argument. How then do we generate like 50 plus pages based on this argument? That's what we look at here. So if we look at the implementation of this file, there's just some meta tags here and something that renders markdown and a popover. By the way, this popover is this thing here, right? But really the magic is how we take this one file and generate like 50 HTML files. Let's look at that. So what we do is we export a function called getStaticPaths. GetStaticPaths receives, it actually reads the entire directory of content for MD files using glob. And as you can see, your content has a bunch of markdown files. Okay, so it gets just an array of strings that represents a markdown file here. And what it'll do is it'll generate one HTML file for every element in that array, one path, as you will, for every element in that array. So at this point, if I was to just like create a new markdown file here, it would automatically get a route here. So the people who are writing the docs, they don't really have to touch code at all. They just write markdown, it magically appears. So it maps MD files to paths. And then getStaticProps receives a param. And of course, this is a param here, right? And what it's going to do is when it receives a param, it's going to just read that file, read the markdown file, and pass the contents of the markdown file as props to this component here. And what do we do with that prop? We just put it in a markdown component that makes things bold and italic and formats as needed. That's it. This one file that's less than 70 lines of code gives us an entire site that is statically generated from markdown. It's incredible. And because it's statically generated, it's fast. It's fast. Let's look at the code generation piece. So let's actually first look at the thing that describes our OpenAPI spec that describes the API that the backend teams and frontend teams use. So if we go to our internal repo of OpenAPI, okay, what we'll see is we have, this is it. And if we go to public, we have this like massive YAML and like really, really large JSON file. And by massive, like I'm not joking, this file is like 3,500 lines long. It's intense. So what we do is we use effectively GitHub as a CDN. We fetch this file using the GitHub API. We have a little function in the code called getOpenAPI reference. And this is kind of what it does, is it checks if we're in a fork of Zata or not, but like if somebody forks it and we use their fork, we don't want to generate stuff. So if it's owned by Zata, we do, just a little security check. We get the file, literally the public OpenAPI file from GitHub at a branch, and we validate it using an open source library and just send JSON, right? That's it. So if you go to the doc site /API/OpenAPI, what you'll see is a massive JSON file that's literally the same as this. We just get it from GitHub and serve it to ourselves. And then we use it to give content to these pages. We can actually look at that. So if we go to API, pages/API/OpenAPI, what we'll see is we encode it because we want it to be fast. And for the sidebar, we get a different thing. It's literally just a data structure that maps well to these menu points here in React. And then for not the sidebar, we get the OpenAPI reference and just deliver it straight through. You can actually see this being called here on the site asynchronously. So if I go to network and refresh, you'll see a call to /OpenAPI where we are actually getting that API endpoint. So yeah, so OpenAPI for sidebar. And what do we get? We get grouped by like category, by branch database table, we get a bunch of endpoints. And we can actually see that here. So we have users first. So if you go to /users, each of these is just in a map in React. I mean, if you're interested in the front-end code, I think I can show it to you in the sidebar. Yeah, it's just a map. So menu items.map and some stuff here, right? So that's how we generate from JSON our API reference. But I mean, even more here, like let's go a bit the extra mile, all right? And if we go to a pull request against this repo, I don't even know if I'm allowed to show you this, but here, this is a pull request that changes the spec. We even provide a comment in this so they can see how this affects the doc site. This is main, that's the change after this PR, and this is a visual diff that will highlight things that changed on the doc site. So it really shows the impact of updating the spec. And I can preview the doc site at this branch of the spec using that link. Right? It's incredible. And this is really going the extra mile to make sure our docs are always up to date. We're really proud of this. Let's talk about feedback and wrap this up. In terms of feedback, how are we making sure our docs are impactful? We already looked at how they work, but let's look at the code. So as you can see, in our main like slug file that is every markdown page, we have a popover that's lazy loaded. It's lazy loaded because we don't want to load 5 kilobytes for no reason. So only when someone highlights this shows up. And we load the React text selection popover. That's an NPM library that just gives you a popover next to your text select. And we render this thing here. And it's just, it's just some DOM. It's essentially, you can imagine the HTML code for this, right? And on-click handlers. So that's the popover. And lastly, let's talk about this feedback button. This is quite cool. So if we go to feedback button, we have some state, is giving feedback. If it's true, we render the whole modal. If not, we just render the button, as evidenced by here, is giving feedback, and then you get this huge modal. But what I want to highlight, I mean, this is pretty standard in React, a text area. What I want to do highlight is the screenshot functionality, because we like it quite a bit. How that works is we have a piece of state called should include screenshot. We have an effect that triggers when this changes. So if it changes, if should include screenshot, then we take a screenshot with a sound effect and we set it in state. Essentially, that's it. And if you deny permission, we also show a nice error. I think let's verify that. So if I cancel, yeah, well, I don't show an error because I canceled. But if there's another error, we show that. This screenshot is an open source library we've created. You can npm install it, and it's literally what it sounds like. There's a function, take screenshot, boom. One last thing is we don't show this checkbox at all on mobile devices. And that's because the library exports a function. And as we see here, if that function is false, we essentially don't render the checkbox at all. Let's just search for checkbox. Exactly. So is browser compatible? And then we show it. Otherwise, we don't. And finally, how do we send it to GitHub? We have send feedback as an API route. And if there's a screenshot, it attaches it, and we send the screenshot to a file upload, like a paste bin. It's secure. We've done our math. We send it to cv.sh. We get the URL to it, and then we post an issue on GitHub using the GitHub API. Those are some technical details, and really those are ways we believe we're providing what we hope to be world-class developer experience with docs. Let's quickly now talk about some takeaways. So we've looked at code already. Let's talk about takeaways. So takeaway number one, a service mindset we find for developer experience is crucial. Like, we really see ourselves as servants of our users. And I think really for developer experience or DevRel, it's really important that we see ourselves as servants, right? We want to have a service mindset. We want to make it extremely convenient and frictionless for people to get done what they want to get done with minimal steps in between, AKA friction. So adopting a service mindset for us is absolutely crucial, and we'd recommend it for your DevRel game if you haven't already considered it. Number two, set a high bar. Like for us, we set probably the highest bar with developer experience. We want it to be smooth. We want, like, we've seen a lot of things where if there's some error and something doesn't exist, say a CLI, right? Then the CLI will just tell you there's an error here. We want to set a higher bar, and instead of just tell you there's an error, ask, shall I create one? And give the user some actionable stuff they can do in the face of errors. So for us, that's one way, but we really believe setting a very high bar for DX and service is really important. As long as, of course, it doesn't cost anyone, their health. We still want to be responsible with burnout and so on. But generally, we set a really high bar, and if we miss the moonshot, we at least land among the stars, right? Number three is reducing human error. Look, we're in a pandemic. We're tired. We're frazzled. We're burnt out sometimes. We make mistakes. And it's totally understandable to make mistakes and get things wrong. And that's why we are reducing as much opportunity for those mistakes as we can by offloading things to the machine. One example of this is code generation from an open API spec. Sure, there may be human error like in the spec. Those can be pull request reviewed, but the error of like not updating the API reference when the API changes, fully mitigated. So we look for opportunities to reduce and mitigate human error as much as possible and take full advantage of that. That's kind of all I have for you. I hope this talk has been meaningful and has helped you in some way. If it has, I'd love it if you could @ me on Twitter or comment and let me know. But for now, I want to say thank you so much for your time and for letting me be a part of this. I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to talking more with you. All right.
Hey again. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tejas, for your great talk. It's really kind of inspiration. Personally, when I saw this, like you could add screenshot and create an issue automatically, I kind of said, whoa, that's really great. So the question, is there anything kind of open sourced like this? Are there any tools that could be used to create such a great, I don't know, feedback loop?
Yeah, there's actually we made that screenshot thing and we decided to open source it. So it's on GitHub. It's called
Mm-hmm.
zata.io/screenshot. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
put a link in the Discord too. But yeah, that can be used now by anybody, and it's quite cool because we don't really make anything new. We just reuse an existing web API. It's called the Media Devices API.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's just a nice wrapper around that.
Yeah, definitely. It's more like about the developer experience, more like user experience, basically. When it's tiny stuff, the tiny features that could be easily created, but it adds kind of great user experience to documentation and to kind of your site. Yeah, by the way, we are waiting for your questions. Please ask anything in Discord, or not actually anything, but it would be great if you will ask anything related to the topic. Please post your messages into Discord, into Telegram, Fwdays channel. Yeah, we are waiting. And while we are waiting, I have one more question from my side. It's it's kind of great that this API stuff could be automated. But do you have any kind of recommendations or suggestions on how to how to keep up to date the documentation? That it's not about API, but rather about some general stuff like architecture, or I don't know, some huge markdown files with introduction. Do you have any practices on how to keep them up to date?
Yeah, I'm really happy you asked me that, and I I wish I could share my screen and show you, but this is actually what we've been working on this last week, because
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of, I mean, like a lot of companies probably have a lot of different projects, different repos, right? And you want to document them. And so we had the decision to make, like, should the documentation for these repos live in a docs repo, or should they live
Mm-hmm.
in the repo of the project? We chose the latter. So whatever team maintains a certain repo, right? They write their README in their repo,
Mm-hmm.
their docs in their repo, and the documentation site, the one that I showed, that thing reads their markdown from GitHub and renders it on the website. So everything is really as close to engineers as possible, so that they maintain it, and they're aware that, like, when they open a pull request, this affects the public docs and such. So yeah, we try to also do that. So our documentation site, like docs.zata.io, it really has almost nothing handwritten. It all just pulls from different repos within the company based on, yeah. I think that's the way, because then we don't have to maintain it. And the engineers, when they work on pull requests, they can also have a checklist item. Hey, did you update the doc? Right? And if they update the docs, then our doc site just updates. So it's a nice chain.
Yeah, that's actually great. If you will automate this, then no one will miss miss to update or miss to deploy the documentation.
Yeah,
Now,
the only thing that we don't know how to automate yet that I want to is when an engineer in their own repo creates a new feature, but then they forget to update the documentation in their. The only way we can catch this is I think pull request reviews, right? But sometimes the pull request reviews move too fast, and then you don't get the chance to write documentation. So yeah.
yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, another point. Actually, you showed the example with Open API, and I know that there is a way to kind of use JS doc to parse JS docs and basically to create auto generate the same documentation for public node models for public API. So I mean API of library. Do you use do you have anything for this?
Yeah, no, not yet. So we looked at that, and we haven't found something comfortable enough. I would really want to do that because at Zara we have an ORM, kind of like Prisma. So you could do like, it's a database, our product, right? So you could do something like db.getAll.getMany.update. There's many methods on this thing. And it would be nice to have a API reference with all of the methods documented. We thought about doing something like that with JS Doc, but we don't have an answer yet. There were some limitations there, but that's I like the questions you're asking because this is exactly the next challenge. And then when we figure it out, we can do another like an updated talk about what we learned.
Yeah, that would be great. I know that there are tools like Docosaurus that could generate something like that, but they're too huge and
Yeah,
doing
this
too
is also,
much.
this is also something we had to consider because like with Docusaurus, we're still not sure because for one thing, every Docusaurus site looks the same. You can just tell the site uses Docusaurus. We don't want that. For us, design is really important. But secondly, we think we'll have more control if we create something
Yeah.
in-house alone, right? And we're not sure if we use Docusaurus, we'll get to a certain point where it's like we need something custom and oh no, we can't do it, and then we're blocked. So that's why we haven't adopted Docusaurus, but we're talking about it. We're thinking about maybe we should, and then if we need something custom, it's open source, so maybe we fork it. I don't know. It's an ongoing conversation. Have
Yeah,
you
thank you. Yeah. We use Docosaurus on our project. We had kind of struggled with it when we tried to mix Docosaurus and basically Bazel to build everything together. But still, it's pretty powerful tool. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not flexible. It's not it's flexible, but it's hard. You need to code pretty huge amount of code to make it flexible for your needs, and basically that could not be such easy to add the screenshotting tool or whatever. You need to look for a plugin. So it's for us it was too much. So yeah, basically we are looking for something simpler and powerful.
Interesting.
So
Have you used Gitbook before? That's another one we're thinking about.
not yet.
Okay. Yeah, this sounds like another conference talk, right? Like we can compare these different tools and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
nice.
definitely. Yeah, documentation is really important part of any product. So basically, yeah, if you have public API or you have REST API, I mean backend provides any API, you definitely need a documentation. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for your great. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say for us at Zara, like the DevRel relationships are the most important thing, but documentation like directly affects the relationship, right? So it's one of the most important things to us as a company. So I fully agree. I think a lot of companies sometimes will ignore docs, but for us, like it's the maximum priority always. Because like our whole thing is just an API. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You probably could ignore docs when you are a small company with few engineers working together, but with growth, you definitely need to write documentation, and especially in this remote work times, the documentation is super important. It speed up the development, communications, and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. Let's switch to Discord and talk with listen for live questions.
Cool. Thanks a lot.